Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. We have made it home safely from Lake of the Ozarks. Had a good strong finish there. We ended up 10th. We were sitting in 4th after the first day. Had a pretty bad hiccup on day 2. Salvaged it with another really good bag on day 3, jumping back up to 10th place. So a top 10 finish is always a good event. Right now, we're still sitting in second place in the AOI points, so we need to be in the top 8 to qualify for BPT. So we've got 4 tournaments down, 2 to go. We got the Potomac River as well as the Mississippi River. But right now, it's one tournament at a time. So I'm very happy to have finished strong here, maintaining a good point position. Really, I lost a couple points to Ron Nelson, who's I think he finished 5th. So I lost another 4 or 5 points to him. But in reality, it was a good event because the top 8 are kind of separating from the pack right now. So I think going into this event, I had like 25-point advantage over ninth place. And I think that's up to like a 65-point advantage over ninth place right now. So really good event. I'm very, very happy with it. If you've watched the recap videos, you saw how my days went. And one thing I want to point out really was from a game plan for this event, I really stuck with sight fishing. I pretty much sight fished the entire time in practice. And when I say that, I wasn't actually fishing, I was looking. And anytime you do that, you know you're really looking to have a big first day, and then ideally, you can back it up on the following days. But a lot of times in bed fishing tournaments, the fish are either caught or have left the bed by the time you get to those second and third and potentially fourth days. And in this case, that's what happened to me. I really was feeling good about day 2, not necessarily because I only went to 8 of the 25 3-pound class fish that I found, but I found 3 at the end of day 1 that I thought would really kinda help me. One of which was a very locked on fish, an easy 3.5-pound class fish, and I probably made a little bit of a mistake in not going to it first thing on day 1. I got there about an hour into the tournament, maybe an hour and a half into the tournament, and it was gone. So I don't know if somebody caught it or if it just wasn't there. My guess is somebody caught it, either whether that was after I found it on day 1, which was kind of towards the end of the tournament day. So there wasn't that much time for another competitor to have found them. But it's possible that they did. But there was also a lot of local pressure, so it's possible a local fisherman found it as well. Regardless, what I want to do in this video is go over the baits that I used, walk you through some of the reasons why I chose the baits that I did, and hopefully it helps you guys in some of the fishing adventures that you have coming up. So because I was primarily bed fishing, I really went with a handful of different baits. Not I didn't I had a lot of baits out on the deck of my boat because I do like to switch to see if I can get a mood change in the fish. But the reality is there were only a few baits that seemed to do most of the damage for me. On day 1, the first couple fish that I caught was on this guy right here. This is the exact rod and reel setup. This is a Yamamoto Ika in just I think it's just the pearl color. I don't actually recall the exact color, but I've got it paired up here just with a 1/4 ounce tungsten weight, and I've got it on a heavy gauge flipping EWG hook. This is 50-pound, what is this? 50-pound Durabraid, and then I've got it matched up here on the FP885 MHX blank that I build. So it's a 7.4. I would say that this is a light heavy action rod. It's a really good flipping rod. And then I've got it paired up with a discontinued Abu Garcia Revo ALF 8.0 to 1 bait cast reel. Now, this is not what I would consider my traditional bed fishing gear. The reason I had this, though, was for 2 reasons. One, there are a ton of cables on Lake of the Ozarks. Most of the shoreline is developed to the point where the docks are so close in some cases, you can't even fit a boat between them. but the docks are all floating docks. So there's cables crossing everywhere. A lot of the cables are completely rusted and are like razor blades. So I needed to have a braid setup to make sure that if I was flipping over those cables, I'd have a good shot at landing those fish. So I had this rigged up. The other reason I like this a lot is because a straight Texas rig on a bait like this Ica is a visual bait for me. I wanted one bait where I was able to see it, because in some instances, to get these fish to bite, I want to be able to know where my bait is at. And if I go with a natural color like green pumpkin or something like that, I'm not going to be able to see where the bait is compared to where the beds are. And in a lot of these cases, the beds were in 5 to 7 foot of water. So they were deeper than I think where a lot of people were looking for their beds. And I think that was one thing that gave me an advantage. But in reality, I still wanted to have a bait where I could see where the fish were at. The first two fish that I caught on day one were on the Ica, and it was simply a matter of the fish being more of a fry guarding phase. So they were just roaming around. They didn't have a bed they were relating to, but I needed to see where my bait was, because with those fish roaming, it was that important for me to be able to recognize where the fish were in comparison to my bait. So that's why I went with this guy. The next three weigh-in fish that I caught on day one were actually on a more of a power shot, drop shot setup. This guy right here. So this is a MHX blank that I built again. It's a NMB 873.5. So it's a medium heavy 7'3" fast action rod. I had it paired up with a 1/4 ounce drop shot weight, a little Fusion 19 drop shot hook, and then just this little weenie worm on the end. And I had it paired up with a discontinued Revo MG, or just it's an MGX 8.0 to 1 bait cast reel by Abu Garcia, 15-pound Berkeley 100% fluorocarbon. This is really this was a good setup for me in this event. Again, if I'm throwing a drop shot for bedfish, a lot of times I'll do it just with spinning gear. But in this case, I had to have a heavier setup because a lot of these fish, again, were inside those cables. So I did catch a lot of fish on this, and they were reacting really well to this little weenie worm, just rigged wacky style. Caught 3 of my weigh-in fish on the first day. Caught a couple of my weigh-in fish, I think, on subsequent days as well. But overall, this was another really good setup for me. I do like to use smaller baits like this at times. It's funny how you get a good reaction out of the fish. In 2 of the fish that I caught in this tournament were showing very little interest in the bait itself until they would get fired up chasing bluegill and other small bass away. When that would happen, when they'd start getting fired up, for whatever reason, at that point they started showing a lot more interest in a drop shot little wacky rigged worm like that than any other bait. So I actually caught several fish when the fish would come back to the bed after chasing something else, and then for whatever reason they would eat that, even though they'd seen that bait for the half hour prior to that. So that was another main setup. Both on days one, well, on all 3 days, another one that I did catch a pile of fish on, including several fish that went towards my limit on each day, was just a Berkeley, the General. This is a MaxScent one. This is a 5-inch. I also threw the 4-inch, and then this was on a 3/64 ounce core tackle hover rig. Basically, guys, in practice I was throwing a lot of like wacky rigged, uh, you know, generals around. But what I was finding is I was losing a lot of them. There were so many fish on this lake. I mean, it's not like, if you want to catch 100 bass in a day, Lake of the Ozarks is the place to go. 9 out of 10 of the ones you catch are going to be under 15 inches. So it's a fantastic place for action. The problem with that is if you're throwing a wacky rigged bait around, you go through a ton of baits. And because I was fishing on the lower end where I was a little deeper, I actually preferred throwing a nail weight in that wacky rig, but I was finding I was losing a ton of nail weights and a ton of worms. So I just went with the hover rig, the 3/64 ounce one, and I don't feel like my catch percentage dropped off at all. And I will say I went through a lot less worms because of it. So this one, all 3 days, caught a bunch of my fish. And then I also did flip around uh, the, I just dropped it, the Max Scent Creature Hog on the 1/8 ounce hover rig, as well as a prototype flipping hover rig that we're coming out with here real soon. Caught several fish as well, a couple of small weigh-in fish on day one with it, a couple of weigh-in fish on day three, but I don't think I've got video of that. But the point is, both these baits were the baits that I was throwing while I was looking for beds. So the first day I pretty much had everything marked. Days 2 and 3, I did a lot of looking while I was just going down the bank. And when I was doing that, these were the two baits I was throwing to docks or to rocks or things that were in the water and catching a pile of fish on it. It was just something that I never, any of the 3 days, I never caught a big fish just kind of fishing while I was looking. I did on day three, I did catch the majority of my fish on just a little Kitech casting jig, the tungsten one, with a little 3-inch Berkeley Pit Boss that I did dye a little bit in the chartreuse. This was 15-pound, 100% fluorocarbon, as well as on a Xenon X Abu Garcia reel. I love these things, guys. These are new this year. Phenomenal reels. And then this is this is an older model of this is an HMB 874 by MHX, the rod. So it's a 7.3 medium heavy fast action rod. It's now been overtaken by the NMB 874 model, which is extremely comparable to it. But this was bigger player on day three when I just decided to kind of wing it and go way up the river. I shouldn't say way up the river, because you could go like 80 miles up that river. But I drove for like a half hour, so I probably went about 35, 40 miles, something like that, up the river, and just decided to go fishing. And I did catch most of the fish. I'm trying to think. Pretty much everything was on that jig except for one fish that I caught on that Ica. I had a 4-pounder that I did find that was a sight fish. But those were the setups. I really kept it pretty simple. Even though in the video you'll see I probably had 15 rods out, and I did catch some fish. I probably should have pulled it out. I did catch some fish on a 3.8 Kitech with a core tackle tush jig, which should be coming out here real soon. The second day I caught my limit of spotted bass, just fishing some marina breakwalls and things like that to kind of make sure that I qualified into the cut for day three. But other than that, that was it. I'm just looking at my rods right now. I did catch one keeper on a 6-inch mag draft on day one. That didn't help me. I think that's it. I pretty much, I really did keep it pretty simple. There was no reason to have a ton of different rods out, even though I did, but it really came down to just a handful of rods. But that's kind of the tackle that I used. In this case, a lot of the baits are interchangeable. I was throwing that 3-inch Ica just because I like that bait, but you could be throwing a white tube. You could be probably throwing a lot of your stick worms. I have roommates that were throwing the Senkos around that day and catching a pile of fish. There's just a lot of fish in that lake. So it really came down to being able to separate yourself from catching small keepers to catching those 3+ pounders. And that's what I was able to do on days 1 and 3. Unfortunately, on day 2, I only had that 8.25 pounds. In hindsight, I really wish I hadn't sat on 3 fish for as long as I did on day 2. I wish I had gone fishing a little bit more, because they were starting to pull up. The weather was warming. They were getting a little bit more stable. And had I gone fishing, like on day 1, in the last 2 hours, I found 3 fish that were 3 pounds or better that were on beds. And I also caught 2 that were like 2.5 just fishing. So had I moved more on day 2, I really do feel like I probably could have culled up at least over that 10-pound mark. Man, yeah, it's disappointing, but the reality is, I still finished 10th in the event. So it's one of those things where it was a good tournament. I did what I needed to do, and now it's time to start thinking about the Potomac River, which is a place that I've been to. I want to say five or six times. I've got mixed results. I've had good tournaments. I've had bad tournaments, but it's a grass fishery. It sets up the way I like to fish. So I'm excited to get there. I do feel like it's a place you're going to need to generate a couple of, bigger bites to kind of separate yourself from the pack, but it should be a good event. So hopefully we can go there, have a good tournament, build on our point lead a little bit, and go to lacrosse. And if we can maintain the point lead that I've got right now, so say roughly 65 points, and we go to lacrosse, at that point, that means I need to finish in the top 65 to secure myself in a BPT bid. And I've got a lot of history on lacrosse. I love that place. It's one of my favorite places to fish. I don't fish it all that much, but I know it, right? Like it's a place where I'm very comfortable, and I would love to go there with a 65-point cushion, which in reality probably means, it needs to be more like you probably need to be in the top 80 or 90 at that point to have to lock it up. But we'll worry about that after the Potomac. Let's go to the Potomac. Heck, let's top 10 that one and then come out of there with a 100-point cushion. That's the goal right now, guys. Let me know if you got any questions regarding my setups. Put it in the comment section. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please hit that subscriber button. And I'll put links for all the baits as well in the video description. So if you want to purchase any and use my Tackle Warehouse affiliate link, you can support the channel that way as well. Thank you so much for the well wishes and all the kind words, guys. Your support means a lot to me, and it motivates me to continue to perform at a high level. So thank you very much.